So today, so excited to have two entrepreneurs who have made really bold moves during their founding journeys. I can't wait to hear more about how they've carved their own paths and also how they are women who are building the future, helping other women as well along the way. First up, Alex Fine, co-founder and CEO of Dame Products. Alex, I saw on your LinkedIn profile, it says you are healing the world through entrepreneurship. And I just want to personally say that is the most incredible personal and professional mission I have ever heard. And clearly, your company is backing that up by destroying the stigma around pleasure for women. Saw that you first made a splash as the first sex toy crowdfunding campaign in Kickstarter's history. Later on, really bold, even sued the New York MTA for rejecting the company's ads, and really interesting topic, highly covered in the press too. So really excited to learn more about that during this conversation. We are also very honored to have Cynthia Valapilli with us today. Cynthia is the founder and CEO of Skin Dossier, a platform for skincare personalization. Cynthia is a former beauty industry exec, marketing professor, founded multiple beauty startups, beautiful startups too, I'm sure. She's a prolific writer for business publications like Fast Company, TechCrunch, and more. And she's a venture partner for Next Gen Ventures as a consumer and retail expert. Cynthia, I see you often using your platform to highlight the headwinds faced by women in the ecosystem, and I applaud you for that and for standing up for underestimated founders everywhere. Not sure when you have time to sleep.
So thank you, Steffi.
Want to hear more about how you balance it all, how you started this all. So why don't we start just with background in this first section of the panel. I'll start with you, Alex. I saw that you have a master's degree in clinical psychology with concentration in sex therapy, and you decided to focus on sexual wellness very early in your career. What made you make that switch to entrepreneurship and kind of incorporate your passion for that and, starting a business?
Impatience. I, was always really passionate about sexual pleasure from like a very young age. And I got my master's in clinical psychology and was on the route for a PhD, which would have been another 6 years of school. Ooh, look at that. And I was just impatient. I really wanted to get out there. I wanted to do more faster. I would say also impatience is probably not the best trait for a therapist, but can be a pretty powerful trait for an entrepreneur. So I was like, let me just get out of a library. I want to get out in the world. I want to make impact now. And I ended up working at a small consumer goods shop selling all natural shampoo for kids and babies. And I absolutely loved it. We were a 3-person team, and it really empowered me to be able to start my own startup, which I then did. So that's kind of very lightweight, that part of my story. I do also really believe that through entrepreneurship, through creating a company, you can impact more people than saying that's maybe not, I think therapy is still something that sometimes I like to dream about. And I think it's a really powerful profession, but you could have kind of a broader touch. You can do a lot through marketing and through entrepreneurship to change perspective and to ultimately heal and be therapeutic in a sense. So yeah, that was it was mostly just an alignment with my personality.
That's awesome. And Cynthia, I think that kind of ties into your story as well. You've founded multiple startups, and they all use technology in some way to change the consumer experience. I'd love to hear about how you decided that personalization in skincare was really like your mission for Skin Dossier and Skin Genie as well.
So for me, personalization, I feel like there are so many DTC brands, and unless you are, unless you have a lot of funding, are a celebrity, or have some kind of, incredible niche offering, it is really, really hard to stand out. More and more, these brands increasingly are, a lot of them same, same products, just, similar branding even. So I thought that the bigger opportunity was, utilizing technology in the beauty space. And especially because of COVID, it's only accelerated the demand for beauty tech. And with personalization, my interest in it stems from the fact that it's extremely inclusive. Like it's inclusive when it's done right, it's accurate. There are gimmicky, personalization offerings out there, but when it's done right, it's accurate and it leads to high conversion rates. We've seen it already implemented with color try-on in the world of color cosmetics. So the next space is, skincare and hair care and supplements actually. And even beyond that, like Medi Spa treatments. So, and I think the opportunity is massive because you really can't rely on user generated experience, for a purchase. You can't rely on editorial picks because these people might have different, hair and skin as you do. The reality is two sisters can even have different hair and skin. So then why are you going by reviews or social media content? You really need to have a very unique approach, and it doesn't get more personal than hyper personalization that's based on your behavior, your DNA, and so forth. So that's my interest in this space.
I love that. And also, both of you have given really effective pitches for your company. So I'm sure all of the founders in the audience really appreciate that. I know we have a lot of founders in the audience. And so I do want to make sure that we touch on the thing that all founders have to think about in terms of getting their companies off the ground, which is fundraising. As we are, being hosted today by Sheworx, whose parent company Republic, uses crowdfunding with both equity and debt methods. VC funding, we know, isn't right for every business. So I'd love to kind of open up a conversation about how founders should think about what type of funding is right for them. There are a lot of different avenues, and I know, Alex, you launched, the first sex toy campaign on Kickstarter. So, and you've raised from other kinds of funds as well. Just to name a few: Chingona Ventures, Miss Grass, Public Goods, the Community Fund. There are a lot of different funders out there. So I wonder, what has your experience been and your biggest lessons? And Cynthia, you as well.
Sure. So some of those were actually brands that my funders have actually, my venture that have funded, like Miss Grass doesn't fund other companies there, just to clarify. But so we started on Indiegogo, which was our first crowdfunding campaign, and we raised $575,000 in 45 days. And that was how we got the business started. I have no words for the gratitude I feel for that platform. And then we also ran a Kickstarter where we raised $400,000 2 years later. And it's just amazing that crowdfunding exists. I think especially it's hard to raise capital. It's harder to raise capital if you are female presenting. It's harder to raise capital if you are a woman of color. It is harder to raise capital if you were talking about sex. For sure, that also adds an additional barrier, an obstacle. So to be able to go directly to consumers, not only was it validating for what we were trying to do, and that people were like, yeah, we want to spend money on this idea and this concept, but it also got us the funds we needed to order our first round of product. It was amazing. It is amazing. If you can if you can generate revenue faster, I think that's fantastic. And I do think that these alternative ways of raising capital are very exciting to me. Not only because you're going around institutions, right, who have all these inherent biases in them, but I think it's also democratizing too. Like, I also think it's kind of really, right now, rich people have more, it's easier for them to get richer by being an accredited investor, and things have changed. And these platforms are kind of not only making it easier for us as founders, but I think they're also changing, the way individuals can also participate in the high growth and returns of what early capital investing can bring. But I still think that fundraising isn't everything. Get to revenue, start figuring out how you can generate $1 today, $2 tomorrow. At the end of the day, that's more important than being able to raise capital.
Cynthia, what's been your experience?
So for my company, I am in the middle of fundraising as we speak. I had started right before COVID, and then I put it on hold and just picked up again about a month and a half ago. And yeah, so I'm right smack in the middle of the process. And I toyed with the idea of crowdfunding, but because my company is primarily a SaaS company, I think it's harder to sell, to retail investors, via crowdfunding. I think it's not something that is impossible, but I think it would be easier once I have the product live. And to get there, I really need funding because my business is basically layers of technology, if you will. It's like a three-tier cake. Yeah, the first layer is, I mean, it's powered by AI and deep learning, and then has multiple diagnostics for the personalization. So the first part is patented DNA technology. So we've got that part down. Then the next layer is bio-rich data. So that's, all this data that's on the smartphone, like, from the health app and the activity app. And those are just a host of information from like period tracking, fertility tracking, workouts. And with workout information specifically, we can understand like endurance and heart rate. So we actually know this person is sweating hardcore, like 5 times a day doing, or 5 times a week doing these intense workouts. Anyway, so that's the bio-rich data. And then finally, the last metric is basically telederm technology with facial imaging with depth, which is comparable to what the iPhone newer models offer with infrared detection of the face in different light settings. So with that, we can understand volume loss and how skin is aging and decipher whether someone has a blackhead, a whitehead, or cystic acne even. So because of all the layers of technology and then the AI that connects everything, it is a much more expensive sort of project and harder to execute without venture funding. And my approach is, I'm focusing on lead investors who understand this space, specialize in moonshot ideas or AI. DTC, I've noticed that a lot of the consumer investors they don't even want to try to understand what I'm doing. They outright tell me, oh, if you were launching with a DTC brand, we'd be interested to talk to you, but you're doing SaaS. So that's my strategy at the moment, focusing on VCs who can lead, and then we'll see what happens.
Awesome. Well, different approaches for different folks. So I wonder if we could bust some myths about fundraising, because I think it's often something that we know can be challenging for people from different backgrounds, women, people of color. There are biases involved in interactions, in pitch meetings. Are there things that you would want other founders who are facing these challenges or potentially about to face them to know? Maybe bust some myths about fundraising and help them understand what was really helpful to you.
I don't want to, but I mean, yeah, I can bust some myths, but maybe these aren't myths. I mean, like, just remember, it's really hard. It is hard, and it's exhausting, and just because people are saying no doesn't mean it's not a good idea, and doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. Investors don't know everything. So yeah, remember that. I think there are different stats out there, but however you cut it, there are a lot of women founders, and they are not getting a proportional amount of the cake. So there's a bias. Like, I don't know. I think a lot of people who are entrepreneurs are kind of like, I can do anything people. Like, my identity isn't going to hold me. Nothing's going to hold me back. So for me, it was really hard. Like, every time I'd come out of something and someone said no, I'm always thinking, like, what could I have done better? And I still think that's the right attitude, because that's all you can do is just make your deck better, make your pitch better, like, keep on getting up in the morning and doing it. But it's also really healthy to remember that it is not just you, and that there is a bias out there, and like, it's not just your mindset. There's also like a system at play here. So just keep that in mind. And then the other thing I'd want you to know is, like, a pitch is a story, and it's, I think it's important for it to be an accurate story that represents the truth. but there are so many ways to tell that story, and there's no shame in telling that story as grandly as you can and focusing in on, it's better to focus in on one or two successes and just really show how successful this one campaign was or whatever it is, and to try and maybe say like everything. And lastly, urgency. Oh my God. Wait till you get just that one lead. I think that's the way to do it. Like, I double click on that statement for sure. And whatever you can do to create that sense of urgency, it sometimes, like, I know I have been like, oh, am I like being honest? Like, where is the line here? Like, when have you really gotten the commitment? But if people are expressing interest, tell other people that people are interested. Like, people are interested. Yeah, people can back out whenever, even like after they've explicitly said interest. So just use any type of interest that you have to tell other people, like, hey, look, I have $500,000 of interest right now. And even if it's like really low interest, it's still there. I don't think that that's lying. And I do think that it is all marketing. I don't know. That one I sucked at, to be honest. Like, I was not good at creating urgency. And the second it became real, the amount of yeses all of a sudden you start getting is frustrating. Like, it's great, but you're like, wow, interesting people.
How about you, Cynthia?
I would say enhancing my personal brand and voice as a founder has been helpful. So another thing I would say is, in terms of busting the fundraising myth, I firmly believe, I think that the warm intro thing is bullshit. There was an article, there was an article written by VC Dell Johnson that went viral titled, warm intro should be banned. I completely 100%, 110% agree with him. I think the people who are getting warm intros are doing the least amount of work, not one. Number two, oftentimes the warm intro is not significant of any kind of professional vetting. It's just a social thing. So then what is the point? So, and I come from the beauty world. And, after that, I did work at a genomic startup with scientists. Again, like, I didn't really have this network of VCs or founders. And having said that, I thought, well, what is the best way for me to shine as a founder? Well, one, what's the word? Position myself as an industry expert. So I did that by writing, and I really honed my writing skills working for Beauty Matter for years. And then occasionally I would write for, Business Insider, Fast Company. And some of these publications were, a little bit more demanding in terms of, the quality of writing that they would accept. So once I did that, I finally got the confidence to pitch myself to TechCrunch. And I became an official contributor. And I'll tell you this, once I did all that, I basically wrote, there are topics that I love to write about. And one of them is obviously my space, this whole personalization, beauty tech space. So I wrote an article titled, Beauty Tech is Big Money, Not Hope in a Jar. And I wrote that for Beauty Matter. And then I changed it, updated it. And then the new article was, although it's not as sexy as DTC, beauty tech is big money, for TechCrunch. So what I did with these articles is I hyperlinked them in my cold email to VCs. And my email is only 2 short paragraphs, but it is extremely informative. So instead of making a whole paragraph explaining what the market opportunity is, I said, I outlined the market opportunity in this TechCrunch article, hyperlink. And then I explained who my team is. I explained that, and then I said, this is, I previously launched a company, very similar, personalization company. It's bootstrap. Within 6 months, I made it profitable to $3.5 million, and hyperlinked, again, an article, so they don't need to take my word for it, to all the press that I got. Yeah, and that has been working for me because I don't have the network. So this is my way of creating, enhancing my personal brand and increasing my voice as a founder. And then I'm not shy to talk about how hard underrepresented founders have it. Like a lot of times we don't even get rejected because we can't get the meetings, which is so ridiculous.
Wow. So that's actually a perfect segue into this next part of the interview, where we want to touch on brand messaging. Essentially, it sounds like the storytelling that you have to do to investors, you also have to think about in terms of cutting above the noise in a crowded market, and finding a really unique, differentiated story for your brand. And so I'd love to hear from both of you on how you articulated that from an early stage in the company, and what advice you have for other founders who are trying to narrow down, like, what are we saying, who are we, and why do we matter as a company. Maybe we'll start with you, Alex, and then we'll go to Cynthia.
Oh, I keep starting. Okay.
Oh, we could do opposite if you want. It's
No.
up to you.
I mean, it doesn't matter. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't, bulldozing my way. I don't know. Yeah. So I think for us, we started with where was white space. Like, I think one of the reasons why I started this company was because it was so obvious to me that sexual wellness mattered, that nobody was really focusing on it from a vulva first perspective or from even a wellness perspective. And that was kind of core to what we were doing from day one. And it really just set ourselves up for having a differentiated plan. I will say now there are some other companies in the space that are doing something similar to what we're doing. So, we kind of have to rethink it. Like, how do we continue to position ourselves so we're different? But I would say it really starts with just understanding your vision, your mission, like your, what do you want to sound like? What are your values? And then from there, building a visual identity on top of that resonates with it, that works with what you want to do. So yeah, I think keep it simple too. Like what's your tagline? Like what is why are you different can also be as simple as our founders. It can be as simple as something like a brand position. I do agree though that in beauty, there's certain categories where the products are the same. I do think it's good to have a differentiated product. I do think that those things matter. Investors are going to ask you what your moat is. And you can also want to say there's a bajillion ways to be successful too, and defining success. You don't have to raise capital. You can have a business that's profitable and it's a small team, and that can work for you, and that could be more successful than some company that goes out and raises a ton of money and the founder owns 5% in the end. There's not one way to do this that is the right way, but yeah, I would say create great products is number one. Really have an amazing offering, and then have a brand that expresses it. Somebody asked me what my moat is, so we do have utility patents and design patents on some of our products. Have utility patents, all of them have design patents. So we really do develop our products in-house and have a unique product development process that helps us create better products. And then it is brand too, is my secondary moat, is having a brand that's really powerfully out there.
And Cynthia, you've been really out there. You've been writing your story, sharing your own experiences, as well as thought leadership on social media platforms. Can you talk more about how founders can think about both the media outreach side and also the kind of generating your own buzz through social media? I know you've hosted lots of Clubhouse conversations as well. How do you think about building your brand through those channels?
So I'm a big believer in being scrappy. I think people forget that fundraising is very much like pitching for press. And as a writer, I'll tell you, my inbox is flooded with emails from publicists. I don't even think I've ever gotten an email directly from a founder. And personally, I want to tell stories. I want to write about the underdogs, the stories that aren't told. I don't have I and TechCrunch doesn't want me writing anything that's already told. They just never want that. They want hot new stories. So yeah, that's been my approach, and I find it baffling that founders are not reaching out to writers directly. It's the same exact process as fundraising, where you identify writers who like to write about certain topics, whether that's, DTC consumer stuff or health tech or food tech, whatever it is. And you look at what they've written about, and then you find them on Twitter, you find them on Club. They're pretty easy to find too, by the way. If they're not on LinkedIn, then they're on Twitter or Clubhouse or all three. And typically you will find them in Clubhouse rooms of that topic, or, just blind email them, blind message them on Twitter. And if that doesn't work, then, just engage them. When they start posting stuff, message them on Twitter or, tweet about the article and why you liked it. And inevitably you will get their attention. So I would highly recommend being very proactive about getting press. You don't need a publicist, especially, when you're an early startup.
Double click.
I want to lob another question out there, which is kind of, it should be a question I think that both of you have a perspective on, because it sounds like your customer segment is primarily women, deliberately, intentionally, because there was a gap in the market. And so I wonder, there's this by women, for women narrative that can be really powerful. But at the same time, it can be sort of an assumption or expectation sometimes on female founders that their marketing and their company uses that story, even if potentially their customer segment is not primarily women. How do you think about that issue? Is that narrative something that you embrace and that you are working with? And how do you think about other female founders, with that topic as well?
I think we definitely create better products because we understand our bodies better than men do. Yeah. With respect to my business, I would say it's unisex, but the majority of the people who are purchasing beauty products are women. But then my business does extend to supplements. A lot of men use supplements too. And hair. Men are very concerned with their hair and losing their hair. So yeah, my business is not for women alone, but I am fine embracing that.
35% of my purchases come from people who Google identifies as male. So we're a big gift giving product. We also make toys that are for partners, for couples. So that doesn't always include a male, but it often does. And yeah, I honestly, I struggle with it. I think it's for women, by women. It's both like, first of all, I identify as like a non-binary woman. Like I feel like other feels besides just being a woman. And so like sometimes it's hard, like that complicates it for me and my personal identity sometimes. I do feel like it's both like just even honestly being a female founder, it's both limiting in some ways and frustrating to always be like, oh, this is a female founder. Like, I don't know if there's an article in the New York Times right now about like a whole campaign to like cross out female and female founder. And it's interesting because it both really resonates with me, and but I also think it's important to acknowledge the differences and the opportunities, and that, people who look like me are not as funded and aren't, and if we just eliminate that aspect, then, and we want to just be treated like any other founder, well, we're not being treated like any other founder, and that's why like spaces like this can be so powerful for us to just remind each other that like we're going through something that is a little different than what the men out there are experiencing. So yeah, I both like embrace it, but want to have nuanced conversations about it, because it can also feel like girl boss right? Like can feel really limiting. And it just doesn't, especially because girl boss, I think, is so girly and so pink. Like it just doesn't feel like me. And I just don't identify with that. So I don't know. It's nuanced. I both really embrace it. I do think that I can speak to experiences as a woman. Everybody looks at me and I'm a woman. I've been told I'm a woman forever. And that does shape my reality. And to just completely ignore that, I think would be a disservice to myself and to other people. And I also just wish, like, when a journalist asks me a question, sometimes I'm like, well, does it matter that I'm a female founder for this question? Why did you say female founder? Like, can I just be a founder right now? So I don't know. Both.
Right. We want those qualifiers to go away so that we can be evaluated and treated fairly. But at the same time, we are living in a world where, you know, gobs of money get given to startups every year and mere slivers, tiny little pieces of the pie get given out as a treat to women.
Yeah.
I would say the gender identification on Crunchbase is extremely necessary. I know that All Raise was involved with that initiative with Crunchbase, and in the end, it provides transparency and it shows whether VC firms are improving on their diversity representation with their allocations. And without that transparency, then what? We're relying on just them to, like, we're taking their word for it. You can't. And as it is, from in the last year, the amount of money for women has only gone down. So whatever we've been doing isn't working, and we need more transparency and more systems in place to ensure that a change happens.
And it's like removing the female from female founder. On the one hand, again, like I saw this campaign and liked it. Like it immediately resonated with me in one sense. But if we remove that, like the idea there is like, oh, I just, all founders are created equally. My gender doesn't matter. Like, please just, but that's not true. Like that is obviously not the case. So it does matter. I both don't want to be looked at as I want to be looked at as a founder, but like, please, but I am a female. I don't know. I agree with what everybody's saying. It's really hard.
It's complicated.
It's complicated. And I just think it's a little too early to probably remove female. Like we're not there. Like we're not treating, I think there's so many men out there who love this campaign and they're like, yeah, all founders are equal, but then they're not addressing their biases because obviously they're the investors that are still holding women founders back from adding value to the world. And I couldn't agree more with the fact that we have a very specific value, or we all diversity will only improve the world.
I want to dig into this topic a little bit deeper. Alex, you had brought up Girl Boss a couple of minutes ago, and there's been a lot of debate about scrutiny on female founders, especially in the media, especially as really high-profile female founders from The Wing, Outdoor Voices, Away, The Reformation. I mean, the list goes on, who have stepped down in recent years. What do you think of this issue? Do you think that female founders are unfairly targeted? Do you worry about that for yourselves as you continue on this journey? I mean, it kind of speaks to the qualifier thing that we just talked about too.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's scary. There is a part of it that's scary. You read it and you're like, oh, I'm a female founder, like, and like you don't want perfection to get in the way of doing stuff. Like I need space to fuck up and for my team to be like, hey, Al, like, this wasn't great, yada yada, so I can correct it. But like I do think that it's not that they're unfairly targeted. I think that we're not maybe targeting men enough, or like you just look at the comparison. What's the Uber guy, Trevor?
Travis what's
Callahan.
his last name? I forgot.
I'm so happy I don't know his name. You know what I mean? But like him, we work, like these men were equally, if not more toxic than those women based on what I've read in my experience. And I think they held their positions for a whole lot longer. So in that sense, yes, I do feel like there's a difference there. On the flip side, there's something about it that I get. There's something about it, like, again, it's just really nuanced, because like if you look at The Wing, there's a whole company built on feminism, built on this idea that that like we can create a better world, and it's not necessarily creating a better world, and there's like a tension there that feels inauthentic to the brand. But I don't know. I want Ty to have more space to like. I want to watch her grow, and I want to continue to watch her grow. And now I feel like I don't have that opportunity to. Is that, there's a
I
lot
think
there.
I've spoken to a lot of female founders that don't really have much sympathy for them, for the, fallen female founders, if you will. And the reason for it is because they think that, these founders got funding with ideas and with very little experience. And then with that opportunity, they screwed up, and they screwed up because of racial issues. The Wing had, an underlying, current of racism. These are not
Yeah.
excusable things. So, and you can't really compare that. I mean, Travis was vilified. You couldn't open any tech publication and not see him get attacked. Like, to this day, he's always attacked in the information. Long since he left Uber. So I don't know. I don't really see a correlation there. But I've
But
heard
he was
from many.
sexual. What didn't he create, like a culture of like sexual harassment?
Right, and he was pushed out.
Eventually, I don't think he was pushed out as quickly. Again, I think that they're both pretty shitty cultures. Neither of them should be acceptable cultures.
But I
But
think now tolerance is a tolerance for misbehavior and things like racism, creating toxic environments, has really gone down for both male and female founders, as it should.
yeah, I do. Do you feel like it's gone down more faster for female founders than it has for
No,
male founders?
I mean, if you look at the founders, many of the founders jumped like from, the rounds and rounds of fundings really quickly. So it's not really any different. You're not
Yeah,
talking about a small little seed stage company. You're talking about a company with offices. Like, I think Wing was opening stuff in London too, right?
yeah. No, I
They were
think like,
big.
and also was Outdoor Voices was that, like, first of all, Outdoor Voices, from my understanding, also wasn't performing very well. So, I think that the ousting of Ty might have had to do more with that. Was it? And I'm not as familiar. Maybe did they? I think they had like a toxic culture, but was there racism specifically there? I'm sure there was. Like, there's racism everywhere, right? Like,
I think it sounds like every company is facing a different kind of challenge. And I
yeah,
wonder if we could steer the conversation to kind of what both of you think are opportunities to uplift women and people of color and different types of founders in the ecosystem. Like, what are the ways that we don't have to keep talking about, toxic environments, and like, are there ways to make this ecosystem healthier for more people? Um, and where do we start with that? I mean, Cynthia, you kind of alluded to that
Yeah.
earlier when you talked about transparency. Do you want to say more about
Yeah.
what
So
you wish venture capitalists would do, what you wish
yeah.
founders would do?
So I hosted a room in Clubhouse, and I wrote an article for Crunchbase about this. The topic was VCs need to show traction for their diversity efforts. And I really, really think that it comes down to the efforts VCs make, because if you look at, they're at the vortex of this problem. VCs make non-diverse investments, in their portfolio founders. Those portfolio founders in turn go and hire non-diverse, executives, and then they hire non-diverse directors and managers, and then it just like it compounds and compounds and compounds, and then before you know it, you've got big companies like Google, creating autonomous vehicles that don't recognize dark skin. Really? That's why diversity is important. There's millions of reasons why it's important, but at the end of the day, if it doesn't start where it begins, then you always are going to have a problem. So how do you solve this? Well, VCs have been talking about it for years. Diversity groups have been talking about it for years. I don't think
Keyword
anything's
being
going to
talk.
change.
Keyword being
Yeah.
talk.
Talk. Yeah, it's all performative. And, in the last year, even after BLM and Me Too, the amount of funding for women and people of color has only gone down. And it wasn't much to begin with. Like, it's laughable. It's extremely irritating for me. Anyway, so how do you resolve this? This is my new article that's coming out soon with TechReg. It's a completely solutions based. And I think, it's going to be a multi-step process, but critical to the solution is a certification. There's a new certification process called the Diversity VC Standard, and it's equivalent to the fair trade mark, or like organic and clean in the consumer world, if you will. And basically, these funds will be audited and then certified based on, how diverse they are, not just in their capital allocations, but also among the employees, if it is a comfortable place for a diverse person to work and, and the career path and all of that together. So there's 2 levels of certification, level 1, level 2. I think in the US, 500 startups has already achieved certification. And then I don't want to get them, 500 startups and a handful of other ones. In Europe, there are I think another 20 or 30 firms that have gotten certification. But I think this is absolutely critical for change, because you cannot let people self-monitor, because they will under-report what's going on.
Alex, you look like you wanted to chime in there.
I just totally agree. I'm so excited that that's happening. I think that that's really important. I do think we need transparency. I think we need data, because at the I think that's what matters.
The numbers don't lie.
Right, the numbers don't lie. I think that there are amazing founders out there. It's not like a pipeline problem, right? Like
there's no pipeline problem.
No pipeline problem.
Stop talking about the pipeline problem, everyone.
It doesn't exist. So let's start tracking the changes. Every business book you read is you can't improve it if you don't measure it. So why would we treat this problem any differently? So yeah, I just totally agree. I also do think though that, for me, especially as a white woman, I have blind spots. There are things I don't know. So for me, understanding how other people effed up, it's really, it's helpful. What were other people's mistakes? We hold space at the company too, to have those conversations. And it is hard. And I think just being empathetic and being okay with the idea that you might fuck it up is really important. And making sure that, I can hear that, oh, I did something that made somebody uncomfortable, and without getting defensive and wanting to explain why my intent was X, if that was my impact, I want to own that, and I want to change my behavior or whatever it is. And so creating space for that, I think, is really, really important. I don't think any company is going to be perfect, but I think it's pretty easy for it to not be toxic.
Awesome. Well, with that, I want to make sure that we have time for these audience questions. But before we get to them, I want to give you a chance to tell us what's next, either for you or for your company or for both. So, Cynthia, what do we have to look forward to from you? It sounds like a TechCrunch article is coming soon. What else?
What else? More talk about, diversity and inclusion. I really think that perhaps one reason people don't take it more seriously is because they don't understand the cumulative impact of the, lack of diversity. And because of the lack of diversity at funds, even women, female partners will judge female founders harder. There is a higher bar of traction. and there's a Harvard Business Review article about that. I can, and multiple other, sources I can cite. But, it's not something that I feel or I've heard from my friends. This has been, proven. So yeah, a lot of work needs to be done. And I think the only way to get there is for women and other underrepresented founders to be more vocal and to demand change. If you don't demand it, it's not going to happen. And along with that, we have to provide this path for solutions. And solutions should be plural. And it should be all the way from accelerators to LPs and everything in between.
Do the work, show the work. Alex, what about you?
I'm going to start following Cynthia and reading all of her articles. That's definitely one thing that's really next for me. But for Dame, we're continuing to grow. We're creating more content. We're coming out with more products. So you can kind of watch us there. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, audience questions. This one comes from Raylina, and I think it's directed at you, Alex. How involved were you in your Kickstarter video and creating the brand voice and approach to talking about taboo subjects? I often use the video as an example of strong brand voice and a very clever way of approaching the taboo. So kudos to you and your team.
Thank you. So we're talking about the Kickstarter video specifically and not the Indiegogo video.
I think so.
Yeah, so Indiegogo was our very first campaign. I would say it was not branded and as cute and fun, but it was really direct. And I think that it's kind of a really great baseline for hey, here's a pleasure gap. Here's the problem. Here's a solution. And this is our product. And this is how we're making it and how you can be a part of that solution. It's really simple and it was really effective. And then our Kickstarter video, and we were highly involved in making it and writing the copy. The Kickstarter video, we worked with a small boutique branding agency that helped us pick this blue back in the day. And we also, they kind of came to us with a few creative ideas that we picked. And then we're always an annoying client, I'd say, a little bit, where we get really specific because language is important for us, and how our messaging is communicated. So I think they've really helped us with our visuals. They really helped us create the voice, and then we kind of would go in with a fine-tuned comb just to make sure we're really kind of hitting the things that we want to say. But we knew we wanted to create a funner video that really brought the product to life versus, which honestly, the basic problem solution video, which effective. Also, they're both effective.
Awesome. This question comes from Christina. In the area of financial aspects of your business, what is the greatest challenge you have? In solving this challenge, how do you consider possible solutions? Pretty high level question, but Cynthia, do you have any thoughts on finance and how to think about overcoming a challenge in that area?
Yeah, so most of the investors that I meet they don't even ask for, the business, my financial model. One or two of them have, and even then they just ask for it just to see if I can understand unit economics of a business and, how I'm going to use. One more recently, asked lots of questions though. And, you just have to be patient and become as fluent as the investor desires that you are. But I think really at the end of the day, the conversation should be focused about one, how you're using funds, and two, how you are going to show them the path to profitability. It does not need to, your plan to get there, in terms of launching things and all that might change. In fact, you should always be able to pivot. Who knows when, another, I shouldn't say that, COVID might happen, but most people I know that, the last year have done major pivots to their business. So only having one plan set in stone is not the way to go. But really, you need to understand business and how you can show them that you're going to be profitable and acquire users, and that part needs to make the most sense. And then if they ask questions, you better learn them fast. You can learn them fast by, finding, someone in your network who can teach you really quickly. If you're not an Excel wizard, I recommend, getting one on, what are those sites? Upwork. Yeah, Upwork. That's the best one. I would say you can get a CP. You can essentially find a, freelance accountant to do it for you. But you need to understand how the model works and, be able to move things around and make adjustments. And yeah, that's a whole lot easier. But you should be focused on the business and fundraising.
We have a question from Pian Pian, who is working on a product for helping people develop soft skills through content and practicing in virtual sessions and coaching. She asked, what works for you in terms of getting users and revenues? And it sounds like that dovetails nicely to your last answer, Cynthia. But like, in terms of how do you get to those, dollars that are coming in? Alex, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, for us, our best path to users has been press, paid ads, and organic content. Those have really been our most effective way of getting it. But actually, you know what? And you know what else I'm not acknowledging is like just community. Really like having space for community, especially if what you're doing is creating like educational spaces. Like community is going to be key for you. People are going to be really engaged in your brand, and like leveraging that community to either have them invite other people, and to cater to them, like to continue to have a two-way conversation with your user base will really help grow, especially in early days where you don't have money for paid. Yeah, and I also, press. You don't need a double click. You don't need a press agency. Like you can go out and create your own press by either pitching journalists yourself or writing your own articles and creating your own brand and creating your own content. So I think that those are really effective ways of finding new users, especially in the early days.
Ooh, that dovetails to another question from Sia. What's the most underrated skill founders should have? And I'd love to hear from both of you on this.
I would say marketing and PR skills. You should be able to, most people don't pitch their company to media outlets or journalists, and it's easy to do. You really don't need to hire an agency to do it. I actually did it myself, and Google press kit, digital press kit, put one together. It should be a PDF. Make the PDF after you create it, in PowerPoint, and then hyperlink that in your little short paragraph to the writer. And what you want to do is essentially create the story yourself. Make it as easy as possible for the writer, and also as unique of a story as you can. It shouldn't be some generic story. Depending on the outlet, they might not care if you got venture funding. Like that's not a story necessarily. Do you have a new innovative product that you just launched? That's a story. Do you have a unique story as a founder that makes you, do you have an incredible founder market fit, blah, blah, whatever that unique edge is. And you might have 5 stories to pitch. So just if one doesn't work, try again in another 2 weeks with another story. But the easier you make it for the story to be written, then I think the higher the probability of it happening. So that's my advice.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think for me, the most underrated, and again, I think sometimes our answers are about stages too, and like where you are and what you're trying to do at that stage. But for me right now, I think it's like empathy and feedback. Like oftentimes, like being able to give clear, direct feedback in a way that is like non-judgmental, is like an incredibly empowering skill set to develop, to help your team grow, to get what you want out of team members. Because really, at the end of the day, once you do get this fundraise, you're building an organization. You're building like a community of people that need to work together and need to create a shared language, and being able to let somebody know when you're not happy with their work in a way that isn't demoralizing. I think is the most underrated skill.
I want to add to to what we're talking about. Communication is also key, and this goes
Yeah.
back to the whole fundraising thing. If you cannot succinctly explain what your business is, like in an elevator pitch that's 1 minute or a few, like 2 sentences, then you're really screwed. Like you're screwed. You have to be able to properly communicate what your company is really succinctly in 1 to 2 sentences in 1 minute, verbally written, and then elaborate on that. And if people don't, if your grandma doesn't understand, or if the generalist writer doesn't understand, or the generalist VC doesn't understand, it's not going to work. Like you need to be able to appeal to all these different people, and that doesn't mean that that writer or VC or investor or whoever is going to do something with that, but they can introduce you to the right person if they understood. So, the communication I think is key, especially if you're talking about, things like, feminine products to a man or AI, like some super technical, SaaS company. Like you need to communicate it in a way that is easily digestible and memorable.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have time for one last question. I saved this one for last. What do you love most about your job and what you do? This is from Anna.
Building my team, I do think there's just such joy in seeing, like, creating a pleasurable work environment. I really do believe that by creating an organization, it's a beautiful place to just play with creating new societies, right? Like you can show that you can create a better world by creating a better organization. Again, not doing it perfectly every day, but feeling like we're doing it right and having people who like to work here is really amazing. And that fills me with joy.
Cynthia?
I would say the building part of it is, that's where I get my high. Building, creating. But, to be fair, there are a lot of lows that come with it too.
Yeah.
The founder journey is lonely and it is hard, and there are many more roadblocks than, than expected. So,
Well, I thank you
Pride in the
both.
closet.
Thank you both for sharing your stories, for being part of this community, for being vulnerable, and being part of lifting up other entrepreneurs who are looking to you for inspiration. Thank you so much.
Thank
thank
you.
you, Steffi.